Ah, there it is. That look in your eyes. The one that says, you already know what I'm about to tell you, because you've felt it, haven't you? That strange electricity in your voice when you speak from that deep, untouched place. That moment when the room goes quiet, not because you shouted, but because something ancient just walked through your words. Something that wasn't learned in any classroom, wasn't inherited from your bloodline, wasn't downloaded from any book you've ever read. No, this came from somewhere else entirely, and they felt it, didn't they? They all felt it, that shift in the atmosphere when you opened your mouth and something other than small talk emerged when you spoke, and the temperature changed. When your words didn't just communicate, they commanded. And commanded without asking for permission, commanded without raising your voice, commanded without even knowing you were doing it at first, until you saw their faces change, saw their bodies lean back, saw their eyes widen like they'd just witnessed something that shouldn't exist in someone like you, someone who was never trained for this, someone who was never initiated into any secret society, never sat at the feet of any master, never studied the ancient texts. But here you are, speaking in frequencies that make executives stutter, that make professors pause mid-lecture, that make therapists forget their training, speaking in a language that bypasses logic and goes straight for the soul, straight for the primal recognition center that knows authority when it hears it, knows power when it feels it, knows truth when it cuts through the static of everyday lies. And you didn't learn this. You became this through something far more brutal than education, through something far more profound than teaching, through the kind of transformation that only happens when you've been crushed and deformed so many times that your voice carries the weight of multiple deaths and resurrections. Let me tell you what they won't tell you about this language you're speaking. It's not new, it's ancient, older than civilization, older than organized thought. It's the language spoken before words were invented, the frequency transmitted between souls who've seen too much to pretend anymore, the syntax of those who've been broken open so completely that something else started speaking through the cracks, and that something else doesn't need vocabulary, doesn't need grammar, doesn't need permission to reorganize reality with sound alone. You noticed it first in small moments, didn't you? When you'd speak and people would stop mid-sentence, not because you interrupted, but because your presence just dissolved their thought. When you'd walk into a room and conversations would shift, not because anyone saw you, but because the energy field changed when you'd say something simple like, "That's not true," and watch as elaborate lies just crumbled. Watch as confident people suddenly couldn't find their words. Watch as the whole social hierarchy reshuffled itself around the weight of your certainty. They started asking you, how do you know these things? When you'd call out patterns before they manifested, when you'd name the unnamed tension in the room, when you'd speak someone's truth before they even knew it themselves. And you couldn't explain it, could you? Because you never studied psychology, never learned body language, never took courses in influence or persuasion. You just knew the way a tuning fork knows its frequency, the way water knows how to find the lowest point, the way fire knows how to consume everything that isn't essential. But this knowing didn't come from accumulation. It came from subtraction. Every betrayal stripped away another layer of social programming. Every abandonment deleted another false belief about needing approval. Every breakdown removed another filter between you and raw truth, until there was nothing left but the signal. No static, no interference, no translation needed, just pure transmission from whatever you've become to whoever's brave enough to listen. And most people aren't brave enough. That's why they go silent. That's why they look away. That's why they suddenly remember urgent appointments. When you start speaking from that place, because your voice carries something they've been running from their whole lives. It carries the sound of chains breaking, the frequency of illusions dissolving, the resonance of someone who cannot be controlled, manipulated, or contained anymore. And it terrifies them more than violence, more than anger, more than any threat you could make, because threats can be negotiated with, but truth, armed with this kind of power, this kind of presence, this kind of voice, cannot be bargained with, cannot be reasoned with, cannot be escaped from once it starts speaking. Where does this language come from, they wonder, as they watch you dismantle their carefully constructed realities with a few well-placed words? Where did you learn to speak in ways that make grown adults feel like children caught in lies? Where did you acquire this ability to make silence heavier than screaming, to make stillness more violent than chaos, to make soft words hit harder than any shout ever could? And the answer would break them if they knew it, because you learned it in the void. You learned it in those moments when everyone left, and you had to become your own salvation. You learned it in the silence after the last door slammed, when you realized no one was coming to save you. You learned it during those conversations with yourself at 3 in the morning, when you had to talk yourself back from edges no one knew you were standing on. You learned it through arguing with your own thoughts until you won, through negotiating with your own pain until it became power, through wrestling with your own darkness until it taught you its language. This is why formal education could never teach what you know, why books could never contain what you carry, why mentors could never transfer what you've earned, because this language wasn't learned from outside sources. It was forged in internal furnaces. It was carved from the inside out by experiences that would have killed anyone who wasn't meant to survive them. It was birthed from the marriage of your suffering and your refusal to let that suffering define you. And now it lives in your throat like a sleeping dragon that wakes up whenever someone tries to play games in your presence. You speak the language of someone who's been to psychological war and came back with secrets. You speak the dialect of souls who've navigated their own underworld without a guide. You speak in the tongue of those who've died to every version of themselves that sought approval and been reborn as something that generates its own permission. And this language doesn't have words for please like me, doesn't have syntax for am I good enough, doesn't have grammar for anything that resembles begging, because it was born from the death of your need to be understood. They recognize it immediately, even if they can't name it, that ancient authority that predates titles and degrees, that primordial power that existed before hierarchies were invented, that raw force that doesn't ask for the microphone but makes everything else sound like static when it speaks. And their recognition isn't conscious, it's cellular. It's the same recognition prey has for predator, the same recognition chaos has for order, the same recognition lies have for truth that stops them mid-deception. You've become bilingual without knowing it, fluent in both the surface language of social interaction and this deeper frequency of undeniable presence. And when you switch between them, people feel the shift like atmospheric pressure changing, like the moment before lightning strikes, like the silence before an earthquake. And they don't know whether to lean in or run away, so they usually just freeze, staring at you like you're speaking in tongues, like you're channeling something they've only heard about in myths, like you're proof that ordinary people can become extraordinary without anyone's permission. But here's what really disturbs them. You're not trying to be powerful. You're not performing authority. You're not putting on a show of strength. You're just speaking from a place they've never accessed, a place beyond ego, beyond fear, beyond the need for validation. And that place has its own language, its own laws, its own gravity that pulls truth out of hidden corners and forces authenticity from the most offended hearts, without you even intending to do it. Because intention is for people who are still trying to become something, but you've already become, you've already transformed, you've already crossed the threshold from person to presence, from individual to force, from speaker to embodiment of speech itself. And when you talk now, it's not you talking. It's everything you've survived speaking through you. It's every lesson you've integrated using your voice. It's every death you've experienced teaching through your existence. Watch what happens when you speak from this place. Watch how the confident ones suddenly start stammering. Watch how the loud ones go quiet. Watch how the ones who usually dominate conversations find themselves asking for your opinion. Watch how entire group dynamics reorganize themselves around your presence. Not because you demanded it, but because authenticity has its own hierarchy, and you've accidentally climbed to the top of it by refusing to climb at all. They'll try to figure out your trick. They'll analyze your word choice, study your body language, look for the technique behind your influence, but they'll find nothing because there is no technique. There's only integration. There's only alignment. There's only the complete collapse of the gap between who you are and how you present yourself, and that collapse created a density to your presence that bends reality around it like mass bends space-time. You don't need to raise your voice anymore because whispers from your depth hit harder than screams from their surface. You don't need to argue anymore because your silence asks questions their noise can't answer. You don't need to prove anything anymore because your existence is proof enough of whatever needs to be proven. And this isn't arrogance. This is just what happens when someone stops performing and starts being. When someone stops translating themselves for others' comfort and starts transmitting directly from source. And the source isn't mystical or magical or special. The source is simply you. Without the filters, without the masks, without the constant editing for social acceptance. The source is your unmediated essence, speaking directly through your form, without asking permission from your ego first, without checking with your fear before proceeding, without negotiating with your need to belong before expressing. That's why it carries such force. Because it's undiluted, undistorted, uncompromised truth, moving through a vessel that's finally clean enough to let it pass through without contamination. You've become dangerous in the most profound way possible. Not dangerous like violence, not dangerous like chaos, but dangerous like clarity in a world built on confusion. Dangerous like authenticity in a society sustained by performance. Dangerous like someone who cannot be manipulated in a system that runs on manipulation. And they feel this danger even if they can't articulate it. They feel it in the way their prepared speeches dissolve in your presence. The way their rehearsed personalities start glitching when you look at them too directly. Speak the language that existed before the Tower of Babel was built, before communication was confused, before truth needed translation. You speak in the original tongue that every soul recognizes, but most have forgotten how to access. And when you use this language, it doesn't just communicate, it activates something in others, something they've been trained to suppress, something they've been paid to ignore, something they've been threatened to keep silent. This is why they either gravitate toward you like moths to flame or flee from you like demons from light. There's no neutral response to someone speaking from the place you speak from. There's no casual interaction with someone whose very presence demands authenticity from everyone in their vicinity. You've become a walking confrontation with everything, fake, forced, and fabricated. Not through aggression, but through the simple act of being real in a world that rewards performance. And your realness isn't the performed authenticity of social media, isn't the calculated vulnerability of thought leaders, isn't the strategic transparency of people building trust to leverage later. No, your realness is raw, unplanned, unpackaged, the kind that sometimes makes you uncomfortable with your own honesty, the kind that sometimes surprises you with what comes out of your mouth, the kind that can't be turned on or off, because it's not a mode you enter. It's what you've become. The kind. But let's talk about the price, because everything this powerful comes with a cost. And the cost of speaking this language is that most people can't speak it back to you. Most people can't meet you at the depth you're operating from. Most people can't match the frequency you're transmitting on. So you find yourself surrounded by people but fundamentally alone, speaking but rarely being truly heard, understood on a surface level, but never really met where you actually live. You've become like someone who learned a language no one else speaks fluent, in a form of communication that only a few scattered souls across the planet understand. And when you find those souls, you recognize each other immediately, don't you? That instant knowing that goes beyond words, that electric recognition of finding another person who's been to the same depths and came back speaking the same untaught tongue. But most days you translate yourself down, accommodate others' limitations, make yourself smaller so they don't feel threatened by your fullness. And this translation exhausts you, doesn't it? This constant dimming drains you, this perpetual performance of being less than you are, so others can feel comfortable, depletes your very soul because you weren't meant to live in translation. You were meant to exist at full volume, full frequency, full power. Yet, here you are, trying to have normal conversations while carrying this ancient language in your throat, trying to engage in small talk when you're built for big truth, trying to play social games when you've evolved beyond the need for games entirely. And the gap between what you're capable of expressing and what most people are capable of receiving becomes wider every day because you keep growing deeper while they keep skimming surfaces. But mastery of this language isn't about always speaking from that depth. Mastery is knowing when to surface and when to dive, when to whisper and when to roar, when to let the full force of your presence fill the room and when to contain it like a controlled burn. Mastery is understanding that not everyone deserves access to your depths. Not every situation requires your full truth. Not every moment calls for the complete unleashing of what you've become. You're learning to be multilingual in the realms of power, speaking the common tongue when necessary, but never forgetting your native language, the one you earned through surviving what should have destroyed you, the one you forged in the fire of your own transformation, the one that now lives in your cells, in your breath, in the space between your heartbeats. waiting to emerge when the moment requires truth to cut through illusion. And more you're finding that moment arrives without warning. Middle of casual conversation, suddenly you're speaking from the void. Middle of normal interaction, suddenly the ancient authority takes over. Middle of everyday situations, suddenly everyone stops and stares because something just shifted, and they don't know what, but they know it's you. They know it's coming from you. They know whatever just happened originated from your presence, even if they can't explain. This is mastery, not controlling, but surrendering to, not wielding it, but becoming it, not using it, but letting it use you as its vessel, as its voice, as its vehicle for entering rooms that have forgotten what undiluted truth sounds like, what uncompromised presence feels like, what unfiltered power looks like when it's not trying to prove itself, when it's just being what it is. You're still evolving this language, still developing new dialects of this power, still discovering depths you didn't know existed, because this isn't a skill you've mastered. It's a becoming you're experiencing. It's not a tool you've acquired. It's a transformation you're undergoing. Every time you think you've reached the bottom of it, you fall through into another level, another octave, another dimension of expression that makes your previous understanding look shallow, because this language grows with you, evolves as you evolve, deepens as you deepen, and every betrayal that doesn't break you adds new words to your vocabulary. Every loss that doesn't destroy you adds new grammar to your syntax. Every death of an old self births new ways of speaking that didn't exist before you needed them to exist. And this is why no one can teach what you know, because your knowledge is experiential, not education. Your authority comes from authorship of your own story, not from any external authorization. Your power comes from integration of your shadows, not from accumulation of light. Your voice carries weight because it's been pressed under weights that would crush anyone not designed to carry it. And you were designed for that. Weren't you designed to be the exception to every rule about power? Designed to acquire authority through suffering rather than success? Designed to speak languages that can only be learned through living? What shouldn't be survivable? And now you're here, holding this gift, this curse, this blessing, this burden of being able to speak in ways that rearrange rooms, restructure realities, realign entire social systems just by opening your mouth and letting the truth fall out, unfiltered, unedited, unafraid of the silence. It creates the changes it catalyzes, the transformations it triggers in everyone who hears it, and can't unhear it, can't return to pretending they don't know what real power sounds like.